It's ironic, because one of the videos that we were going to do this week is on blueprinting a stock intake manifold. And we'll still do that video, but first I want to do this. Because as I'm pondering this video, something pops up on my YouTube, the recommendations from Garage 54. So if you're not familiar, Garage 54, these are our Russian gearhead brothers. And they do these crazy videos. Very entertaining channel. Always experimenting stuff, always making stuff, doing off-the-wall things. But some of the stuff they do is really interesting. And they make see-through parts. They like making see-through parts. So they did a see-through oil pan so you could see how things are running there, and they did a see-through differential cover. They did a lot of videos like that. But they did a see-through intake manifold. So what they did was, out of Lexan or similar material, whatever material it was, they fashioned an intake manifold. They do all of their experimentation on Lada engines, which is like a Russian economy car, and I've got Ladas everywhere. So they made this individual runner, big plenum manifold. It's a tunnel ram. If you think of a tunnel ram laid on its side, feeding a 4-cylinder engine, that's what they built. And they built it out of this clear material and ran the engine with it. So what's amazing about this is that we've done countless videos on intake manifolds and intake manifold dynamics and the way things that happen inside an intake manifold, even up to that video we did about seasoning an engine that's been sitting for a long time and what happens inside the runners and all. And this video, like, it shows, it illustrates every single point we ever made. So people think of an intake manifold runner as just a simple passage, and on the surface it is. But there are things that are happening in here. There's a whole dynamic, there's a world, a universe of things happening in the intake port that will make or break the way your engine runs. So this was a very interesting video, and there were parts of it that I watched over and over and over again because they really illustrate these principles that we talk about. Now there might be better videos of this out there, and if there are, leave a link because I'd like to see them. But this is the first one that I've seen. So we'll talk about some of the things that popped right out at me. And the first was, we did that video not too long ago about seasoning an engine after it's been sitting for a long period of time. How you've got an engine that's been sitting for a year or two and you go to start it, you got to drown it with gas to get it to go. And this video shows exactly why that is. Because you watch when they first start the engine, it's cold, and they first start the engine. The very first thing that happens is liquid fuel gathers on the inside of the runners. Like, it just piles right on there. It saturates the runners. Now you can see where an engine that's been sitting for a long period of time that's got like a dusty kind of surface to it is going to absorb all of that gas and not allow enough vapor to get into the combustion chamber to get the motor started. This is what happens in normal circumstances, like on the one that they're showing. As soon as they start the motor, the very first thing that happens is the inside surfaces of the runners get saturated with gasoline. And that gasoline stays there for the most part. And it's important because later on, as the engine is running, that gasoline is illustrating the liquid gas that's puddled there, illustrates some of the other things that are going on. So I thought that was interesting. So they've got the engine running, and he cracks the throttle a few times. And what I found was interesting was how efficient and uniform that column of fuel running through the runner was. The mixture, the fuel and air mixture. Because it's sudden, and it's uniform, and it's beautiful. It just goes through like that. Beautiful column of fuel. But what's interesting now is that as the engine is running, and he opens the throttle, you would think that that column of mixture coming through and the suction from the piston coming down with the intake valve open would be enough to pull that liquid fuel off of the runners. But it doesn't. That liquid fuel just stays there. So it shows the boundary layer, in effect, inside the runner. Now that tells you a couple of things. The first is that for the runner to have maximum efficiency, it has to be larger than what you would think it would need, because a good portion of the inside of the runner isn't moving anything. It's just stagnant. It just stays there. So a slightly oversized runner, even though you would think it would be bad for velocity, is actually the best thing for volume, because a good portion of it isn't moving. It's just staying there. And then the second thing is that you definitely don't want a smooth surface like they have on their runners, because now they're using a clear plastic and it's smooth on the inside. And the gasoline that comes out of suspension just sticks to it, doesn't want to move, it doesn't want to get sucked through. So if a lot of people will port the intake on their engine, they'll port the intake runners, they'll port the intake port in the cylinder heads, and they'll try to get it polished. And that's exactly the last thing you want to do. You want it to have a rough sort of texture so that that gasoline doesn't have a smooth surface to bond with. It's more likely to get pulled into the mixture or into the column, the incoming column of mixture, and burn that way. Definitely want to leave a texture there. Now we talk about sonic pulses. So sonic tuning is it's a key element to like every intake manifold design. And it has to do with the length of the runner and how the sonic pulse, which starts when the intake valve closes. So picture this now, when we've done videos on this. The intake mixture, the column of intake is coming through, the valve closes and the mixture hits it, and then there's a sonic pulse that heads back up the runner and then turns around and comes back to the now opening intake valve and helps to shove that mixture through. That's ram tuning. And that's why different length runners tune at different RPMs. Well, on their manifold, this is very clearly seen by watching the fuel that's stuck to the walls of the runner. So it doesn't get pulled in, but you can actually watch that fuel move back and forth in sympathy to the sonic pulse. So it's like a visual representation of something that you really can't see otherwise. So it's just like a bonus side effect of the way they built that. Now another thing that really becomes obvious when he opens the throttle and you see that beautiful uniform column of fuel running through the runner, what becomes obvious is that any upset in that port, in that runner, any place from the plenum to the intake valve is going to have a detrimental effect on that atomized fuel as it's coming through. Remember, it's atomized, it's not vaporized, it's atomized. So the fuel droplets are tiny fuel droplets, and they're in suspension mixed in with the air. It's the whole point of the atomization process. Well, if you have any imperfections in the runner, and the one that comes to my mind right away is a port mix match, that is going to act to slice some of that fuel out of suspension from that column. And like I said, you have to really watch this, the way that column moves through. Well, you could see that any disturbance in that runner is going to cause some of that fuel to come out of suspension. It comes out of suspension, and then all it does is run past the intake into the combustion chamber as a liquid droplet, and it won't burn during that initial hit. So spark plug lights, it goes for the lightest atomized, vaporized parts of the mixture. That's what lights. And then the heavier parts are lit further down the pistons travel. So you'll get maximum pressure, let's say at 30 or 40, 45 degrees past top dead center. Well, the heavier parts of the mixture don't really start to burn until then, because it takes time to do that. So it's a situation where you can have an engine that is theoretically jetted correctly or getting the correct amount of fuel, but because some of it is being sliced out of the column as it runs through the runner, it's going in as liquid, and the engine will actually show as running lean, right? So volume and the amount of fuel that's actually burned in the chamber under pressure are two different things. So that's why that gasket matching is so important, and not just for performance engines. See, right away, everybody thinks of gasket matching as something you do in the course of, wait, let's back up. For those who aren't familiar with gasket matching, I know this is like hot rodding 101, right? But gasket matching is where you take the intake manifold gasket, you put it over the intake side of the cylinder head, and you open the ports to match the gasket. Then you take the same gasket and you put it to the intake manifold, and you open these ports to match that. So you've got a uniform, there's no step. You've got a uniform transition from the intake manifold to the cylinder head. So what it shows on this Lada motor, which is like the lowest performance thing you can imagine, it's an economy car, it's a communist era economy car. even that would have a detrimental, you would see it would be a detrimental effect to the way that engine runs if there is a mix match to the port and the runner. So even on a regular engine, something that has nothing to do with high performance, but just a daily driver, doing a gasket matching can go a long way to making this thing run efficiently, because any fuel that gets sliced out of that column, out of that atomized column, and ends up as liquid droplets inside the combustion chamber isn't getting burned, it's just getting wasted. So that gasket matching, really important, whether it's a high performance engine or not. There were so many good elements to this video, and like I said, I'm sure there are others, I'm just not aware of them. If you've got a good one, leave it in the comments and I'll check it out. But in the meantime, you go check out their video. Garage 54, these guys are great. This particular video, we're going to censor the comments. Anything that's political in nature is going to get deleted. I hate to do it that way, but some people just got to throw their 2 cents into everything, so we'll keep it clean. So at any rate, that's it. Go watch that video, learn from it, watch it over and over and over again. Every time I watched it, I saw another element that caught my interest. I could sit here for the next 10 hours and do a video on this. I'd have to go back and watch it again. But every time I watched it, I saw another element of that. I said, okay, look at that. Look at the way this is going. Very interesting stuff. That's it, guys. Oh, the reason I even bring this up to begin with is because we finished our 361. I put this together over the last couple of days. I didn't bother covering it content-wise because it's all stuff we've done over and over and over again. A lot of it is what we did on the slag hammer build last year. So I didn't want to do, there's no content there that we haven't already covered, so I just went ahead and put it together. But the first intake manifold we're going to use on this engine is a factory 4-barrel intake manifold, and I'm going to blueprint it. And like I said, as I'm contemplating doing that video and explaining why and how we're going to do certain things to this intake manifold, this one pops up. So anyway, you'll see more on this in the future, and this week we'll do the blueprinting of that intake manifold, as well as our 400. Tomorrow we do the crankshaft on it, and there's a lot of interesting elements on that I want to cover. So that's it for now, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.